Hello, welcome to Reality Vomit Podcast, an extension of the Vomit series of podcasts. As always, I'm your host, Mac Taylor, and we are here today to discuss some more, or actually, discuss the first part of Real World Reunion. We're going back to New York. The first season of The Real World. They got the cast back together even in these COVID times to discuss, to just try it again, to see what happens. We put the same 7 people who stopped being polite and start being real almost 30 years ago, do it again. So this is episode 1, back to reality. Whoop, the ghost gravity. Okay, sorry. I'm not going to do that to you guys. So, same street, different decade. Music, killing it, by the way. Between this and the Challenge All-Stars, they are just nailing these soundtracks, man. I've been rocking it. So we see some audition tapes where I guess the people involved thought this was a documentary about young artists, which is interesting. And for those of you, I said this on a couple different podcasts, but I'm going to make it very abundantly clear here. When I covered The Real World Season 1, that was just planned for me to cover because I'm going to cover certain reality shows every season of them. So I just started season 1 of The Real World. What I did not know is that Paramount Plus was making this Real World Reunion. So it just worked out that literally like 2 or 3 weeks after I finished my coverage on The Real World Reunion comes out. I thought that was so crazy that happened. But nevertheless, again, this was not planned. It was just a happy incident. So, again, they thought this was a documentary. They thought it was about, people wanting to learn about young artists trying to be making it. They had no idea, however, that it would become such a huge part of American television. They were the first American reality show. Reality that would spin off into the real world that would, and things like Big Brother and Survivor and The Amazing Race and Road Rules and all this stuff would come out of being a part of this experiment. Now we got the same loft. It's just obviously been remodeled since it's not as enclosed and small. It's been upgraded a little bit. On the same street. The only thing, I wish they did the same editing. Like, they put the old photos in there, and they're definitely doing it service. But, like, I wish we had that old editing where they were doing random confessionals, because now they have a confessional room. I wish they'd had, like, the confessionals on the roof, and, like, in random parts of the house, with those little squiggles coming up and stuff. I wish we had that old school editing, but we don't. It feels like a normal reality show these days in the editing part. But it is so unique to see them all back together again. And we get the old and new photos. Julie was the starry-eyed teen that, wanted to come, leave Alabama, small town Alabama, where she had been her whole life, to go see the world, go to New York and try to make it as a dancer. She then followed the dream for a little bit after the season, but ended up, to take care of her parents, and met a guy in Birmingham, ended up staying in Birmingham, becoming a dance teacher and a mother. And then she jokes about not giving production what they wanted, because unlike a lot of future Real World seasons, there were no hookups. There was a lot of serious racial talks, but there wasn't a lot of like petty drama. It felt very, it's ironic to say this, but it felt very real. These felt like, these weren't people trying to be famous. These were people that thought they were going to do this thing and then go on to other things. So they weren't all in on this show per se. So they really weren't interested in giving the show what it wanted. So Julie's excited to see everyone back together. Becky's the first one in this time. And I think the loft looks a lot better, but in 30 years we've come full circle. And Becky, she was an enigma, and she's still an enigma to me, because she started in the show as an aspiring singer, but like never really, like, besides that first like episode, didn't really sing. Mostly just talked about strange things and just had random conversations. But since then, she put out a couple of albums, but then turned healer. She studied the art of spiritual healing, and she has that classic line, or that all of them say, where she's like, "Well, what I do is like illegal. I can't legally call it medicine, but it's technically medicine. Like, it's so much. So, like, again, Becky is such an enigma to me, so interesting to me. I would love to meet her just to try to get inside that head and see what the hell's in there. Kevin is back, and he was the activist turned politician. He wrote. It was the writer. Did a lot of writing. Met people like Tupac and Biggie and Dave Chappelle, and all because of his real world experience. But tried to shy away from it because didn't want to be known for the real world. Right, wanted to be known for this thing he'd set out to do. And now has since tried to run for politics. He's looking to mend old, have old conversations in the past, really finish the business from 30 years ago. And then the two discuss how a lot of the issues that they had in the 90s, they were talking about on the show, are very prevalent today still. And I even talked about that on my podcast, of the original Real World season. Like, a lot of the stuff that happened with the race issues and political upset and homophobia and things like that, like, it's still present today, which is very sad. It's different. It's the same, but it's got a different spin on it, right? It's still the same shit, just wrapped in a different box, right? And then they get the photos of Gouda and Smokey, who have obviously since passed away, but Gouda was an adorable doggo, and Smokey was, I'm not a cat person, but Smokey was very iconic to the series. Andre tries to be less reserved because his first time around, he was just doing this for exposure for his band, because this was on MTV. And he didn't really open himself up to the experience as much. It was more about his band, all about his band. And this time he's going to lean more into trying to be 100% Andre and not Andre, the guy in a rock band. Which is very interesting. And besides, I think Norman had the least amount of screen time in the real world. But Andre was down there. He really didn't have a lot either, because he wasn't with people a lot. Most of them didn't keep up with Julie after the series, so they're interested in seeing her. Julie comes in and sits in Norman's lap, just as she did, when she entered last time, and they show the footage side by side. Good stuff there. Becky almost party fouls. She dropped these bottles on the fridge. And then Heather B is back. My girl is back. I love her so much. Heather B is an icon, okay? The world does not deserve Heather B. And since, she was a rapper on The Real World, and she has since moved into podcasting. She does 3 different shows a day, with cooking and stuff with the community, and she's just, and she seems so happy with her life. She does. And she's just always Heather all the time, and I love that. And everyone wants to know, where is Eric? Eric was obviously the model actor, also the young party kid. Now he's a health nut who's completely clean, does not take any drugs or alcohol. It's all about like the wheatgrass and shit. And basically he's like a television personality as well. after the Real World, he did like exercise tapes and movies and some challenges. So did Heather and Norman and Becky. Julie and Andre and Kevin never did the challenge. Heather only did one season of the challenge. Becky did 2. I think Norman did 2 or 3. There was some exposure. Eric did 2, I think. And they are the true reality TV OGs. And there's talks of the past, because right after the show, when they were doing the press circuit, everyone was kind of mad at how much screen time Julie and Eric got. Like, it was the Julie and Eric show in a way. And it kind of was in a way, because they had this forced romance kind of thing going on, right? And they were a little salty about it. But, that's all behind them now. But, they talk about, they weren't ready for the exposure they were really going to get from being on the Real World. So they are informed that Eric is not with them because he has COVID and is isolated until he is cleared, until, the COVID is gone. So they talk about the exposure and just how they were not ready for all of the magazine covers and the interviews and the television circuit. Everyone's crushed that Eric can't be there with them, because Eric was kind of the energy of the group, was the light. Even on the original Real World season, a lot of the fun moments Eric was part of. Becky's like, Eric, just come in here. I'll get what I get. Heather's like, speak for yourself. That was a fun moment. They do a group confessional for him, just wishing him well. Eric talks about, after when he was in the height of his fame, he had troubles with addictions, and that's why he went green. They all talk about how fast everything moved. Heather talked about, being young and dumb, and you'd have $50, and that $50 would last you for like a couple weeks. And you just go into the next party and just, getting by, and you were okay living off of nothing. And how that's changed, and life is so different 30 years later. It's a very interesting dichotomy. Andre is also, he's going to sleep on the couch because he doesn't want to sleep in the same room. Like, could sleep in the same room as the girls. And he's like, yeah, I'm married, so that's weird for me. It's also good stuff there. Heather brought a bar with her, essentially. She had a whole bag just full of alcohol because she likes to make her drinks, her mixed drinks for the group. So that was good stuff there. And they're glad just to do this because they were worried that, because they had all 7 been together since the press circuit following the Real World. So that since 1992, they have not all 7 been together. They have been together in various groups. I know they did a 10-year reunion thing where Julie and Norman and Heather got together. After the show, I think Julie lived with Norman for a little bit. Norman ended up staying with Becky for a little bit. But people like Kevin and Andre really went their own ways from the group. And just like that last episode, they said like they probably would never be together again, and here they are together again. And they were worried that by the time they would go to do this, one of them would be dead. So it's glad that they get one final hurrah, but they want Eric with them. Eric's not really with them. There's only 6 of them right now. So Andre and Julie then video chat with their kids. Andre has a daughter who, is adorable and into music, and it's great for him. He gets to share that with his kid. Julie has older kids because Andre's daughters, is like grade school. Julie has 2 kids, one of which just went to college, like basically took the dive that she did on the Real World by going to college, out of state and everything. And her daughter's in high school, and her daughter wants to be an activist and like wants to talk to Kevin and talks about doing things in the community. And Kevin's like in awe because I think when he sees Julie's daughter, he sees the Julie from 1992. And even though he and Julie had issues, he always adored Julie. I think he always thought so highly of Julie that seeing her daughter, it was almost like seeing like his niece in a way for the first time. He was just in awe of this girl. So MTV ruled the world at the time too. Because nowadays, reality contestants, there's so many. There's so many reality TV shows. There's so many contestants every year. It's hard to get exposure from the show like this. Back then, MTV dominated the television scene. It was way before streaming, way before anything. In the 90s, MTV was like a god channel. So if you were on there, you were going to get watched. Things like the OG, Real World and Road Rules and The Challenge and Beavis and Butthead and the music videos. It was all there. So that's why they got so much exposure, especially with the teenage audience. So 90s teens and young adults had their own lifestyle. The 90s was, every decade has their own claim to fame. And sadly, I was a teenager, young adult in the 2010s. Not the best time for that. I'm not exactly super proud of my generation. But I think I was more suited for the 70s, 80s generation, maybe even the 90s generation in a way, because I do love reality TV. But it would have been interesting to have watched all these shows as they aired. But, man, the 90s was unique, and they talk about that. And their show, it wasn't trashy fights, and it was debates, which is what it's why I love the Real World Season 1 so much, is because it's so unique to all the other reality shows that I've seen. It was its own entity in a way. So I hold it in very high regards. That's why I was so interested in seeing this and not waiting to do this later. Like, I felt like I needed to cover this soon. So they talk about Kevin's portrayal. Now he's obviously more leveled. He's not as... He kind of knows how to conduct himself a little more. Because I think... And I talked about a lot. And I was a little hard on Kevin in my podcast. Now, I'll admit that. But he had good points at times. But he didn't really know how to convey them in a conversation. It just felt like he was yelling at you and not talking to you a lot of the time. Or he was talking at you, per se, right? And not, to you. Because he was angry at a lot of the things in the world, which he had a right to be angry about, but he took it out on people around him. Whereas here, he's ready to have open conversations and hope that he can educate people and that people will listen, but he will also listen to people. And it's also going to be a very interesting thing moving forward with Kevin. And Heather also really defends Kevin this time around, which because she stayed out of it last time, but this time she has nothing to lose. So then we also have the big Julie versus Kevin fight still lingering, because while Kevin and Julie are talking about her daughter, they start to play the audio of the fight, and you can tell it, both of them, it's still there. The tension's still there about this fight they had 30 years ago, because it was one of the biggest fights and probably most important talks about race on television. So Kevin, and he wants to bring it up, but obviously, as a day one, let everybody get a little comfortable before I bring this up. That brings us to episode 2, The More Things Change. So Eric takes another test, but still not in the clear. Heather seems to be Eric's biggest fan. She's like, Eric, I brought you all these vegetables and all these things. You need to get here. We're going to party. I miss you. I love, Heather always talking about Eric. And he is the only one that kept in touch with all of them. Eric is kind of the glue of the cast in a way that I didn't expect him to be when I saw him on the show initially. And then we have a shower ordeal where Norman's getting sprayed by the thing because Becky won't share her bathtub. Because she has the room by herself because Heather didn't want to sleep upstairs. And so Julie slept in the same room as Heather. So really, Becky's what she calls the luxury suite with the bathroom in it. And it has a bathtub. And as we know about Norman, he loves to take baths. And she won't let him use it. So he's very upset. Heather talks about doing her 3 shows in one day. She's a hustler. She gets it done. But it never feels like work to her. She talks about meeting Whoopi Goldberg and getting complimented on her great vibes, her good energy that she gave off, and that's why Heather doesn't, it's not work to her. It's just stuff she gets paid to spend her day as her way. And that's, isn't that just the fucking goal, man? Kevin talks about, meeting Tupac after the Real World, because of the Real World. He made great connections. So he talks about wanting to separate from the show and how, he didn't want that to be his identity, which is great. Like, I understand that. A lot of people try to live off being on reality TV. That wasn't what he wanted to do. He had other things he wanted to do. He didn't want to be Kevin from the Real World. I get that. I understand that. But he talked a lot about not getting opportunities and the Real World was the ultimate opportunity for him because he got a lot of good writing stuff out of it. So, at least he can acknowledge that. But again, I understand, especially, a few years after wanting to do other things, not wanting to really be associated with just the Real World. I get it. I'm not faulting him for that at all. So Heather and Kevin trying to connect more this time because they didn't really spend a lot of time together last time. So, they're really trying to get it in. Julie, Norman, and Becky go to the Color Museum. And in the ball pit, Norman's like, get out of the ball pit, Julie, you'll get the COVID. She's like, everyone's ass is on those balls. That's on your face. And Norman's universally liked by the cast. He was pretty popular because he's easy to talk to, easy to vibe with. So, it's good to see him back on the screen. Eric taking an ice bath, trying to help with his temperature. He's struggling because he wants to be clear so we can be with them too. And Becky has this great room and bathroom and still complains because it's just Becky. Becky not getting the best edit this time around. Was Grant generally had the best edit the first time around? But they're really kind of burying Becky a little bit here. Heather cooks and bartends for them that night. And Becky sings this odd song about the 8th house guests. And she made an album, started a family and then turned healer and divorced and all that business. And Becky says that when she was started to be getting into music, she used a Ouija board and ended up contacting the ghost. I can't make this up. The ghost of John Lennon, who taught her, who gave her the ideas for her songs, taught her music. And Julie has great reactions. Julie's face, she can't just have a poker face. And her face is like, what the fuck are you doing? And Heather's lighting incense, nope, I don't want no bad mojo in here. Becky, don't be bringing that in here. And Julie's like, well, did you use the Ouija board in here? She's like, yeah. And it shows footage of her using it. And Julie's like, she had this man in my room while I was asleep and didn't even ask me if I wanted in on it. Great Julie line. Julie is confessional queen. She really is. She knows how to give good confessionals and facial expressions. And Andre tops her, though, because he's like, what are you talking about? He's like, you didn't talk to the ghost of John Lennon. And that's not a slight on you, Becky. That's because why would John Lennon, that's like how great John Lennon is, why would he come to you? And he's like, I don't even believe in God. So, and they start talking, and she's like, well, he's not here anymore. He left, but he told me goodbye and blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, oh my God. Becky's such an enigma. I fucking love it. And Julie talks about, she was the first one cast, which obvious first choice. She was the girl that you put her in New York and just see what happens. Like, and then the rest of they put like 6, put together talents, and the starry-eyed Southerner, and put them in a house together. Like, it made perfect sense. Like, Julie wanted to see the world, and these other people wanted this opportunity, and you just put them on. Like, it made perfect. The cast made perfect sense. And they talk about Heather's music being like woke as fuck, which it was, talking about the system sucks, about people not taking like date rape seriously. I'm like, those songs would kill today, man. Like, kill today. She was way ahead of her time with what she was spitting. And then Julie shits, like, they're in the confessional, and she shit talks to her cat. She goes, I feel bad for those other Real World seasons that didn't get to go to New York, the greatest city in the world. They're like, Julie, calm down. And she's like, no, all your other Real World seasons, y'all sucked. And I'm like, whoa, Julie, tell them how you really feel. And Norman plans to revenge shit in Becky's bathroom. So he's eating all these muffins and trying to brew a poo. So that's an odd phrase, brew a poo. To shit all in her bathroom as revenge for not letting him use her bathtub. Which is crazy. And then Heather and Julie are just watching the fireworks happen. Because they don't want to be part of it. They're just like, let's watch this. Drop my mic. God damn it. You don't want to be a part of all this. So Norman's snoring, keeping the crew up. Becky's in her suite, so it doesn't bother her. Becky also lived with her dad, and it was her teacher of healing. Just a true, of course Becky became a spiritual healer. Like, it just makes she was talking to the ghost of John Lennon. Of course she's a fucking spiritual healer, man. And I'm not shitting on Becky, okay? I don't know what people see and what they interact with. Do I think she interacted with the ghost of John Lennon? No. Do I think what Andre said about, you just feeling it came from somewhere? Yeah. But, I ain't saying anything about Becky. Like, I love watching her because of shit like this. So you just keep it coming, Becky. They send Eric a care package of some greens, and they show the old Becky versus Kevin fight, which I talked about in the podcast. I was on Becky's side for most of it. The initial point, I get. With Kevin's, I get the point. He did not go about it the right way, which he was open to talking about. He talked about receiving a lot of backlash for talking to a white woman that way. And, he had points. But now he slows it down, puts it into perspective, and he makes total sense. And he apologizes for calling her a bitch at the end of that. Which, again, good. All the things I knocked Kevin for doing, he's fixed. So clearly he's taken the criticism over the years and channeled that into the way he goes about these conversations, which is great. But Becky takes it in a bad direction, refuses to listen, and just keeps interrupting him. And he's trying to stay calm, but it's hard to when someone keeps interrupting you. And everyone else in the circle looks uncomfortable as fuck. Because they know Becky's being a little unreasonable here. And I understand. She doesn't want to be called a racist. I get it. But, let him finish what he's saying and then come with what you're saying. Like, don't just keep interjecting. Like, let him say his piece and then you say your piece. That's how it works. So, he even admits to using her to talk to the issue. Like, it wasn't just to her. He was, it was his frustration with the whole thing coming out at her in that moment. But like I said, in that old clip, Becky had points. But in this situation, I guess I would Kevin. Because he didn't really do a whole lot wrong here. He tried to make a point, and she just wouldn't listen. So, it was sad to hear. So that ends this portion of the podcast. I cannot wait to see how this Becky Kevin fight spirals into. I can't wait to see just where we go from here. I don't know how many episodes are planned for this, but I'm enjoying it. I think it'll be like 13. I've had a blasty blast with it. And I hope you guys are having a blasty blast too. Don't forget to like, subscribe, hit that bell notification, and for all future podcasts, both the reality, syndicated, and film vomit. Until next time, stay safe. Most importantly, stay nerdy.